listening to the Straight to Video podcast with Rob Lane.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for checking out my show, Straight to Video. As always, I'm your host, Rob Lane, and I'm stoked you took the time to listen. This is episode 95, and this is a good one. Certainly one of my favorites, and we cover some really cool, fun stuff. Today's guest is drummer and podcaster Kevin Rankin. Since 2016, Kevin has been the powerhouse drummer for 80s legends Flock of Seagulls, and prior to that he held the drum spot for 15 years for another 80s band, Animotion, who you'll know for their massive hit Obsession. What's cool though is Kevin is a full-on rock dude who has been working his way through the ranks since growing up in Montana and moving to Portland, Oregon in the mid-1990s. Last year, Kevin began hosting his own online show, All Access Live, which is when he came to my attention interviewing the one and only Johnny Monaco. Since then, Kevin has racked up almost 200 episodes of his show, chatting to his friends and some serious heavy hitters in the music business. Be sure to get in touch with Kevin and check out his show over at accesskevin.com, or you can find out all about his amazing career at kevinrankin.com. Whilst you're over there, please pay our friends Dead Skull Coffee a visit at deadskullcoffee.co.uk, and as a thanks for listening to this show, they're serving up a great 15% discount on any order of their rock and roll coffee. Simply add the promo code STV on checkout and the discount will be applied. You can also walk away knowing you're supporting a great independent business who love their rock music. I'm sure you'll enjoy this talk. We really get deep into how meeting people as you move through the music industry and how these people can really have a massive effect on your journey. Kevin even knows the guy that made me want to pick up the bass guitar in the first place, Todd Jensen, who has played with icons such as David Lee Roth, Hardline, Alice Cooper and Steve Perry, to name just a few. Kevin also opens up on how tough being away from the road has been for him and his fellow music friends, struggles with mental health and the importance of reaching out and talking to someone. This really is one of the most fun, honest, heartfelt chats I've had the chance to do on the show, and want to thank Kevin for being just so cool. Hope you enjoy this as I bring you my straight to video talk with drummer Kevin Rankin.
Hey, Rob, how you doing? Good to see you.
You too, man. You too. How's things over there?
Things are good. Yeah, man, it's beautiful here. I was trying to see if I could get my GoPro going because it can just show the wrinkles even better. I heard your conversation about Michael Anthony signing your Van Halen back there, which is cool. I loved the Michael Starr interview. It was fun.
Oh, nice one, man. Thank you for listening to that.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Yeah, you're fantastic. You do a great job.
Lots of editing. Oh.
See, that's a real, a drag about mine, man. I just fly by the seat of my pants. Everything's spontaneous, and sometimes it doesn't flow as fast, but that's cool.
You've been smashing it, man. Firing them out. It's like I can do 2 a week, and at that I'm at breaking point now. I'm like, it's a lot of work.
Especially for editing. Honestly, I'm doing more than I should, to be honest. I booked them, and then more people, I realized, oh man, I got to get this guy on. I got to get that guy on. And so I started booking those shows. And then I realized the viewership dropped way off, because people are kind of sick of me, which I totally get. I think the algorithm and Facebook and YouTube, mostly the social media stuff has said, okay, dude, you're posting too much. So it's a selfish thing for me. But I think having known that, and I'm going to kind of ride out the ones that I do have booked and then be more selective on the dates that I push. And, I wasn't sure how much time I was going to have. And, my conversations too, they go anywhere from an hour to 2 sometimes. I know that people's attention span is way too short for that too. But when somebody's getting really deep and it's emotional, I just let them go. I don't want to cut them off and say, oh, thanks for talking about your real serious issues there, but we've got to go, So the feedback, and I'm sure you get it too, people that want to help you out will say, you know what, really just try and knock it down to like 15 minutes. Good luck. For the conversations that I have, I get chatty and I can talk too much. But when people are talking about very important things to them, I want to let them go. And so I'd rather bore somebody else, but let somebody bare their soul, So I'm hitting episode 199 on Tuesday. And I have a client friend that I interviewed that I'm doing some work for as well that asked if she could do the 200th episode interviewing me. And she teaches these writing retreats in Santa Fe, New Mexico, up, in the high desert, beautiful place. I was just up there with her about a week ago. And there's something really magical about the area that she's in. And I would love to have done the interview there. Not that it's not cool where I'm at, but I'd never been to that area. I always heard really good things about it. And when I got there, you could feel the energy was different. We'd hike up on the side of this mountain and just look over the valley. And I thought, that would be a really special place to have. But I think people have heard enough of me that I don't know that they necessarily need to hear an interview of me. But you know what? If Rob Lane is interested, then so be it.
I'm interested. I've enjoyed diving in. But the first thing I got to ask, how do you know Todd Jensen?
Wow. Well, he's a Portlander. He's here in the Portland area. So I'm not originally from here, but I've been in Portland for 27 years. I was a huge Hardline fan back, like, oh my God.
Man.
Yeah, man. I mean, that Double Eclipse record is certainly in my top 10 of all time, right? Every song is amazing. Dean Castanova's a good friend. And, I've gotten to know just Johnny a little bit over the last, couple of years just through social media. A gal that I dated was hardcore fan. And so, Todd was, again, as a bass player, right? He was I think the most underappreciated cat in the business, right? Because he did so much with Van Halen and so much for Roth, and incredible bass player, but even more so, the guy can sing like a bird. He'd be doing cover gigs here. Like, so, of course, he worked with David Lee Roth, he worked with Van Halen really as a catch-all. He did everything for him from, management, like tour management to being a gopher. And I know his ex-wife a little bit as well. And I was on the board of directors for the Oregon Music Hall of Fame. He is like another one of those guys that doesn't like to call a ton of attention to himself. Even with the Van Halen stuff, he was so behind the scenes. He didn't even want to draw attention to himself. And I'm sure he got asked about Van Halen stuff a million times. I never wanted to talk to him about it other than to say, I wanted to commiserate with him when he had to babysit a little bit, when Roth kind of went off the rails and was a challenge, because I know that he's so level-headed. But he was doing these cover gigs with all of my friends here in the Portland area. And you'd walk into a little club and see, this iconic legend out there playing. And to me, it wasn't that he never acted like it was beneath him. He's not interested in doing my show when I first started doing the show, because he just kind of wanted to stay quiet about things. And I totally understood. And when I first started doing this show, people don't know me as a podcaster or as an interviewer. They just knew me as this silly drummer in town. But I have so much respect for the dude, not only musically, but as a person too. So yeah, that's a long answer for how I know Todd Jensen.
No, because I know going through your, particularly your early career, I know you had a few brushes with a couple of musicians who had a really big effect on you and kind of set you on a path. And Todd Jensen is the guy for me that did that to me.
Really?
I'm the usual failed guitarist. I was playing guitar, and my time of music where I was really getting into it was like 89 to 91, that kind of crossover time. And I saw David Lee Roth on the Little Ain't Enough tour, which Todd was playing bass for. I didn't know anything about him, got the tour program and all that kind of stuff. Then I was a massive Extreme fan.
Oh yeah, me too.
Extreme were our band when we were at school and college, so we'd follow them everywhere and went to see Extreme on the Three Sides to Every Story tour.
Okay.
And Hardline was supporting them.
Wow,
this band came on. Just fucking floored the place. But I'm like, I recognize that bass player for some reason. I didn't know anything about the band, but I recognized the bass player. And afterwards, we used to wait for autographs and all kinds of stuff like that. Hardline came out, signed my ticket. I recognized the name. I was like, oh, Todd Jensen. I put two and two together. And I says, oh, we're coming to the show in Birmingham. And he's like, oh, come say hi. Somebody says that to me, I take them literally.
Yeah, absolutely.
Rolled up to the Birmingham show. I walked straight to the loading area, banging on the door. Todd Jensen says, I need to come and say hi. I was like 17 or something like that. 10 minutes later, Todd Jensen comes out and speaks to us for like 15, 20 minutes in the freezing cold. Just the most humble dude.
That's the way he is, man.
Bass player from that moment. I'm playing bass.
Oh, really? Okay. And so you were 17 when that happened. And for me too, I had sort of life-changing moments at that age. Those were the formative years, right? That when we're playing music, it just becomes like this obsession that's what you want to do for the rest of your life, right? No longer does the standard day job appeal to you. And you could see not only the magic of those guys on stage, but what Todd did for you backstage, in the freezing cold, talking to you, where he normalized the job and he became a little bit connected to you in a different way. Like, it's not only attainable, but that's how you want it to be, right? For me, I had a couple of moments like that too. And I think had I not had those moments, I don't know that I would have been so pursuant, and going after this. But, Extreme, I know, was really, really big there in the UK. And then they came back around a couple of years ago and did their tour because Dan Reed Network was supporting them. And Dan Reed Network is a huge band in that area. Again, they're a Portland band as well, and dear friends of mine. Their drummer is my video guy for my web design business, and Dan Reed is in Prague now. But I know that the UK is really where they find their second home. So it's great that you got the best of all those worlds. And I actually went over and saw them with Electric Boys.
Oh wow, cool.
In Wales a couple years ago.
They're a great band. Connie is a legend.
Okay, yeah, So we played at that Bognor Regis, the silly carnival that's down at the Butlins. Butlins is the name of the place. Yeah, we had a show there, and then I just trekked over to Wales because Dan Reed and Electric Boys were playing the next night. So
oh, nice! I bet that was awesome.
It was amazing. Yeah, fun to see my local homeboys playing in another continent.
So, what was your involvement in that whole Oregon Music Hall of Fame thing? It seemed like quite an important thing there. You was involved in it for quite some time, right?
Yeah, I did 7 years on that board, and they set that organization up to recognize all these musicians that have had an impact, either people that are from Oregon or they've moved to Oregon and had a real formative time in their life. So they recognized a lot of people like the Kingsmen, with Louie and Paul Revere and the Raiders, and a lot of soul like Robert Cray, a lot of blues guys. And they started a scholarship fund for kids that couldn't afford to go to music school. And so they'd have an annual event every year where they'd recognize all these people to induct them into the Hall of Fame. At that event, they would auction off things like autographed guitars and merchandise that bands had dropped off. The president of the board owns this music store, Music Millennium here. And he was great about acquiring guitars and other kind of merchandise to get autographs only for that event, not as a collector so much, but he would offer these up in this auction, and the auction money would then supplement scholarships for these kids. I didn't care so much about honoring somebody in the Hall of Fame because to me, I don't want to be the guy that says that one band is better than another, just the same as, like talent contests and battle of the bands and those kinds of things. Everybody's different, and I could see the value and quality in everybody. So I didn't want to be on the voting board. I wanted to be part of the music education part. So when these kids wanted to go to music school and they could afford it, getting some kind of supplement was important. So that was my whole intent. And I did web work for them. We did all these events and showcased a lot of musicians that might not have had opportunities to play gigs. It was great. I mean, it's a nonprofit. Like any nonprofit, you need to sort of have a turnover in the board of directors. And I think 7 years was probably a couple years too long for me. And I was getting caught up in that and not so much in other things that I really need to focus on. So it's an amazing organization and I still support them as much as I can. But I got tired of other musicians saying, hey man, why haven't I been inducted in the Hall of Fame yet? And
oh man, that's when it gets dangerous.
Sure. You understand, you do your show. And I'm sure you've had, friends in the business that have said, hey, why haven't I been on your show, Rob? So yeah, it's a little annoying.
I'm going to dive back. How was your childhood growing up in Montana? I'm guessing during the late 70s and 80s. Was you into anything before music came along?
It's interesting. I played clarinet first. My dad was a Dixieland jazz player. And so he played saxophone and clarinet. And I loved watching his band. I'd watch all the rehearsals and go see the gigs when I could. I loved the energy that was there. It didn't have the vibe that rock and roll did for sure. I have an uncle in Chicago that was this amazing jazz drummer. And so we went to visit him. Boy, I guess I was 14. At that point, my discovery of rock and roll was ZZ Top, maybe Night Ranger. I'd seen those guys. And so that was, at that point, that was what rock and roll was to me. And saw Scorpions that summer, Prince, Billy Idol. My uncle's drum set had this massive set of rototoms. His son, my cousin, played fair warning. That record from me, start to finish, is the first time I heard a good substantial part of Van Halen. And that changed me completely. At that point, I thought, okay, I need to play like Alex Van Halen. I saw the video for Looks That Kill from Tommy Lee, from Motley Crue, and I wanted to be Tommy Lee. Saw Scorpions, and I thought, okay, I have to be the next drummer for Scorpions. This is just, that was a game changer for me. And so, but I was living in the mountains in Montana in this cabin. So I went back home and I started piecing together drums from every place that I could, from garage sales, markets, and like secondhand stores.
Was you like getting a copy of like Hit Parader? I need one of those.
Oh, yep. Hit Parader and Circus Magazine. And I would scour those magazines, like just dreaming, like every teenager did, of being in every one of those bands, right? It's funny because I've talked to Dave Menichetti from Y&T about this a lot. One of the things that I remember the most is that there was an article right around the time that Summertime Girls came out for that band. My concept of rock stardom, right? All these guys were incredibly rich and, they had everything they'd ever wanted with every girl they ever wanted. And Dave said, I really haven't hit the stardom that I need. He said, I'll feel like I made it once I get a Ferrari of my own. I've asked him about it a couple of times. I said, hey, man, did you ever get that Ferrari? And he said, no, I just bought a vineyard and I have a winery instead. So he matured and he got past that. But I would set up those drums and I didn't even have enough money for cymbal stands at that point. We were in this cabin. We had these wood rafters. I'd hang my cymbals off ropes. Every time I'd crash the cymbals, I'd have to duck and make sure they didn't come back and hit me in the head. And then I would set up my drums outside, just blast Kiss records and play, as loud as I could. And it would just echo down the canyon walls, and we didn't have neighbors for miles. So I was very lucky to have parents that were supportive and didn't shut me down. And they'd rather hear me hitting drums than other stuff. And it really was such an incredible time of my life that I couldn't wait to get out of the mountains and into the big city. And I look back at that now, and I think probably took a lot for granted because every time I get out into the mountains, it's such a special place that I think, oh, okay. There was a magic to this that I overlooked in some ways.
I think everybody does that with something that you're involved in so much, it just becomes normality after a while.
Yeah.
And it is something you need to get away from to appreciate.
Sure. Yeah. No, absolutely. I don't know if you've been to the States some, but Yellowstone Park, of course, you've heard about. I worked in Yellowstone in the end of my high school years, and that was the only time that I really appreciated that kind of nature. And I still feel like it's my favorite place on the planet. So I can appreciate that, but I wouldn't have pursued music had I just stayed behind working for the national park. And so I feel like I've gotten the best of all of those worlds now.
That's crazy that you could rehearse outside. Most drummers as a young kid, I would imagine, okay, you've got a 1 hour window to practice your drums and you got to stop.
Yeah.
But now you can just go out and just play for as long as you want.
That's it. Yeah. They would shut me down at 10, but I'd get home from high school if I was taking the bus, which took 2 hours to get home.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh yeah. We were way out in the woods, but I get home between like 4 and 5 and I'd play until 10. I'd skip dinner and my parents would just let me go. And they'd say, okay, 10 o'clock, that's enough. But I think I probably ought to be a little better on the drum kit, after playing that much at that point.
Do you have any brothers and sisters then?
Yeah. I have a little brother. He's 6 years younger, not at all interested in playing music, but he's a huge hair metal fan, as am I, right? So we shared that commonality. Hey, we had a lot of those kind of shows together. Like I said, the first concert I saw was ZZ Top and Night Ranger. I've become great friends with Kelly Keagy over the years, and we've talked a lot about that first show. As a singing drummer, I was certainly impressed by that, and I love that they kind of had him off to the side but showcased up front, so that it didn't stick that guy way in the back. And the energy from that band was crazy. Still to this day, it blows my mind that band 40 years later still has as much energy as anybody out there, but it still didn't quite, the bug didn't get me just at that point. Yeah, really. Seeing Scorps for the first time was the game changer. The lights, the vocals, the dual guitar, heroics, and just everything about that production. It was like seeing Star Wars for the first time.
If your brother's 6 years younger than you, where was he in the whole hair metal game?
He was born in 76. Now he eats this stuff up. I used to pride myself on having this encyclopedic knowledge of all the hair metal stuff. And I would get pretty deep, but he finds everything from, Scandinavian, like backcountry and hard rock. And he'll say, yeah, have you heard about this band? And I'm thinking, how the hell did you find this? And thankfully, between Spotify and YouTube and every Reddit group, he can find stuff like that. But he really developed an interest mostly because of me.
He didn't have any choice.
Yeah, that was it, man. He was not going to be growing up listening to the Britney Spears of the day.
So you mentioned Tommy Lee. Who else was your heroes? I think you mentioned Eric Carr.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Of course, I was a Kiss fan, like most kids were at that point. But everything about Eric Carr rocked my world. He had a huge drum kit, played his ass off, could sing, but he smiled all the time. When he was playing, you knew that guy was having a blast. And I've gotten a lot of grief for that over the years, for smiling, especially in some of the heavier bands that I played in. They've said, there's no smiling in heavy metal. And I'm like, man, what's the point, right? If you're not having a good time.
Are you like Mark Wahlberg in the Rockstar film where he's trying to do the photo shoot?
That's totally me. Oh my God. In fact, you know what? If you look at any band photos of me with any of the bands I played in, I would say 90% of the shots, I'm smiling and I'm the only guy smiling in the band.
You're doing the trickster pose in everyone. You're just looking so happy.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I've joked with them. We did some shows with Trickster back in the day, and yeah, I remember seeing that energy. They were just kids, of course, and you think about our life at that point. We didn't have to worry about politics or COVID or bills or anything like that, right? We were just having fun. And I think that's the great thing about playing the 80s stuff now, the bands that we play with and the shows that we play. People can kind of escape from that for a couple of hours and just unload and unwind and feel like they're back in 1986, just where there were no cares in the world except having a good time.
It's a summer afternoon or evening, the sun's setting, got a beer.
That's right.
Playing your favorite tunes. That's all you need.
Absolutely. Yeah. Just unplug for a couple of hours. It's what we all need.
So that Eric Carr passion got you.
Yeah. I obsessed on Eric. I scoured everything. I found his old bands, in New York, and every inch of my log cabin walls was covered with not only Kiss stuff, but Eric Carr stuff. He was the first hero that I had that passed away at an untimely, age. And there was a lot about Eric that opened my eyes to the music business. I watched, unfortunately, the way that he was treated from his bosses in that band. I really felt like he was underappreciated. And when he was in the hospital dying of brain cancer, not visited once, by Gene. And as a Kiss fan, I lost all that respect, right, for Gene. And you'd read articles from Eric's mom and Carrie Stevens, Eric's ex, and she'd talk about how disappointed because Eric looked up to them so much too. As a young musician, I felt like, wow, this is the other side of the music business. This is the side that's the selfish side. This is the business side of things. And of course, Gene Simmons is all about the business, right? And I've tried to be objective about it and look at his choices. And, this is not a bash Gene Simmons segment, but as a fan of Eric Carr, I felt like he did Eric dirty. It was hard to see that, but it was also an eye-opener to see that, this is part of the business, man. And don't be surprised if it happens to you.
Yeah, watch your back.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So rest in peace, Eric.
What a contrast to Peter Criss. I mean, no disrespect to Peter Criss, but Eric Carr comes along just smashing those drums.
Yeah. And, Eric Singer is a phenomenal drummer too, of course, and I've met Eric a bunch of times and we've traded gigs, in the past, but Eric Carr was something special. I think everybody that I know that's met him said that he was exactly that way in person. And I never did get to meet him. But yeah, I like hearing that too, that it wasn't just a show. He was really that nice guy.
So you're getting heavily into the drums and you would meet, is it bassist Rob Kohler, who kind of took you under your wing and you formed a band with when you were 17. Was it Energy Positive?
Wow. Look at you. You've done your homework.
I don't know where I found it. I found it somewhere.
Yeah. Again, this was a change in time for me because I was such a rock fan. Scorpions and Kiss and all of those, the bands from that era were my obsession. My dad, as a Dixieland jazz guy, wanted me to expand my interests a little bit. And he took me to see Chick Corea acoustic band in a town a couple of hours away. Dave Weckl on drums, John Patitucci on bass. And I was so blown away by this show. I'd never seen or heard anything like it. And so I ran backstage to say, what was that? And Dave Weckl really just took me aside. We talked for a while backstage. My dad had to talk his way back to get to me. And he said, hey, you know what? Let's just, meet up back at the hotel. I'll meet you in the lobby and we'll grab some dinner. And so my dad sat in the next table while Dave Weckl talked to me about the music industry. He asked, do you party? And I thought he was asking me to party. And I said, no, man. I'm a clean, sober guy. And he said, well, good, because if you want to do this for a living, there's no way you're going to be in your 30s and 40s and still doing this thing successfully if, you're putting stuff up your nose. It stayed with me. He wrote me a letter later that I, still have framed to this day that, explained a lot of the electronic stuff that he was getting into at the time. And just like that moment that you had with Todd Jensen, Dave Weckl, to me, showed me that, okay, yeah, you can be approachable. You can take interest in somebody else. And it's not all about the crazy partying after the show, but you can make an impact and difference with somebody. So I got into progressive stuff, progressive rock, progressive jazz stuff. And Rob Kohler had been playing some jazz shows with my dad. Now, Rob had this original band, In Flight trio, with his brother that had been playing at the Montreux Jazz Festival. They'd done really pretty big things for this little Montana jazz trio. And they were more new age progressive jazz. And Rob wanted to do a rock project. And he knew that I was all about the rock stuff. So he put me together with a couple of other guys that he had assembled, and Energy Positive was born. All original music. I would say on the rock side, most influenced by Living Colour at that point. It was great. Lots of odd meter stuff, but real melodic hooks in the songs. And we did a good handful of shows to whet my appetite in the original side of things. I was playing in a cover band at that point too, playing almost every night, like 4 nights a week or 5 nights a week through high school, playing ski resorts a couple of hours from my house. So I got my stage chops pretty early. When everybody else was working McDonald's, flipping burgers, I was driving up to the ski resorts and playing these gigs, both the cover gigs and the original band. And Rob, to this day, is such an influence on me. He has since gone back to Montana as well, but he taught university in Oregon, played all over the place. He lived in New Orleans for a while, and he's got so many records out and so many signature basses. And I owe a lot to him. He was older, but he took a young punk and put him to work,
How did all that gigging affect your academic stuff? Did it have an effect driving to a gig, coming back at crazy hours, getting up for school?
Well, I didn't have a 4-point, but I also didn't fail anything, thankfully. I was so committed to being a rock star that I wasn't going to let anything drop. I knew that it's funny. My dad's been sober my entire life, but he also knew that being in the club scene was probably not the best environment for somebody that might be predisposed to have the alcoholic gene. So my mom and dad didn't want me playing in bars. So I would lie to them about doing these shows. I'd say, oh yeah, we're playing a private party for this, person up at the ski resort. And my dad walked in on a gig once, and he and his friend walked into a show, and I saw him come into the door, and I told the guys, hey, take a break. And I ran around the back of the club, back in the door, and my dad's standing at the door, doesn't even look at me. He just, as I walk up by his side, he said, you making some good money? And I said, yes, Dad, I am. And, at that point, it was enough that, it was paying for my gas and giving me the experience. I was getting off, like close to 2:00 in the morning every night, and then driving back home, get home at 4, leave for school at 7. I went a long time with no sleep, but I figured I'll sleep when I'm dead, right? When you're young, you feel like you can live through all that. And I kind of followed that same path till today, until the pandemic, really. That was my mantra, just because there's so much to experience that I just didn't want to miss out. So academically, I did all right. And I really didn't want to go on to college at that point. When I graduated high school, I was 17. All of my friends were going to Los Angeles. They were hitting the Sunset Strip. It was 1988. It was, at the back end, at least, of that era. My best friend went on to the Musicians Institute to go play drums. And a couple of friends went to GIT. Yeah, the day we graduated high school, they all left. And my parents were supportive of me going to Los Angeles, but they said, at least stick around and get a degree in something that might be supplemental to your music career. Not as a backup plan, but a supplemental plan. They were really careful about their wording because they knew how much it meant to me. It's funny because of all of those guys, I'm the only guy that's still playing music. And I think a lot of it was paying dues, sticking around. My degree was in sociology, and I was really interested in kids. During that time, I was playing shows. I worked managing a music retail store. And then I worked in a residential youth facility with kids that had been both abused and neglected, and also offenders. It was so Jekyll and Hyde. I had 2 completely different lives, and I kind of still do. But back then, I put a ton of energy into trying to help these kids that have had a rough go get a leg up. And it kind of burned me out. College for me was about that experience, about working with children, understanding how people are, both the good and bad side of people. I really got into criminology I wanted to be a profiler. I wanted to be Agent Starling, from Silence of the Lambs. Criminal profiling, serial killers. I was really into that. And so that was going to be my supplemental plan, just in case I didn't make it as a rock star. But then working with these kids, I burned out on the youth counseling. When I moved to Portland, it was to chase music, but I also was going to go to grad school here. And fortuitously, they dropped the criminology program at the school I was going to go to within months of me moving to Portland. It was almost like, at least I read it as a sign that, you know what, go for it, man. You got to get the music thing out of you. So yeah, that's really, the path from Montana to Portland, which may have been your next question, was knowing that the Northwest was really happening at that point. This is 93. Seattle was blown up, right? Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, Alice in Chains, all of those bands were so huge at that point. And I had worked with Pearl Jam. I can get into the Pearl Jam thing in a second, but moving to Portland was as close to small town Montana with the big city feel. Seattle felt too big. I was married at that point, and my wife was very supportive of me chasing my music career, but she didn't want to move to Seattle. She felt like it was just too claustrophobic. Portland felt like a little town at that point, but it's 3 hours or less than 3 hours from Seattle. And it had all of the trappings, all the rock clubs and all the opportunities to play music. You're still close to all the beautiful parts of the world. You're close to the ocean, close to the mountains, and it's green. And
you were sold.
I was sold. Yeah, absolutely.
But whilst at college, didn't you get into like booking bands or working with bands which had come through town?
Yeah, so that connects to the Pearl Jam thing. I wasn't booking them at the time, but my friends were. The bass player in my band worked for the college in the concert committee. And so they booked all sorts of bands, from your pals in Poison to 38 Special, REO Speedwagon, and Richard Marx, all the bands of that time.
How big were the venues then? They must have been pretty big venues.
Yeah. There's a field house, because I was in a college town, probably held 9,000-10,000. I think that's the largest venue. So these bands had come through. Now, the bass player for Pearl Jam, Jeff Ament, his brother Barry was in our art classes and kept saying, you got to book my brother's band. They're starting to blow up. And of course, when you hear somebody say, yeah, my brother's band is going to be huge, you're like, oh, okay, yeah. So my friend Luke Duran on the concert committee said, yeah, we'll book them. They were called Mookie Blaylock at that point. And so they booked them for the fairgrounds in a pig barn. It's a small venue, probably held 2,000 at max, but it's reserved for, rodeos, like farm type events. And between the time they booked them and the time they came through, they changed the name to Pearl Jam. They got signed to Sony and had just released the video for Alive. So the show comes up that day. They had come into town in Sprinter vans, basically. They just had large vans and nobody had a tour bus at that point. And they had one tech for everything: drums, bass, guitar. He was setting up monitors. Scully was that guy's name. He was setting up the drum kit, and Dave had just signed a deal with DW. So he sets the drum kit up, but the drum heads they weren't even barely tightened up. They were just flappy. And I said, hey man, you want me to tune up his floors? And he said, no, he likes them this way. Just leave them. And I thought, there's no way. There's no tone on. And so when he walked away, I tuned up the kit and I hit him a little bit. And he's like, hey, don't touch his drum kit. And I said, okay. And then Dave walks in and he goes, hey man, drums are sounding great, Scully. And he said, okay. So Dave and I, during, the sound check and the show, we just hit it off. He just had me stand right behind him for the entire show. And I was so blown away by the power in this guy. The band was great. And I understood the allure of Pearl Jam. But Dave Abersees, to me, exemplified everything from Tommy Lee to Bonham and everything in between. He had the power and the finesse and also just this presence and this energy. And he was so cool to me. So we hung out afterwards, just like, the experiences that we've talked about.
How old was he at the time?
He's a year older than me. So at that point, he would have been like 24 or 23. Real young to us now. So Scully was asking me, hey, you want to maybe, come along as sort of an apprentice to hit these other shows? And I was not interested in drum teching. I wanted to play drums. I could care less about setting up somebody else's gear, not realizing how big they were going to be, but it didn't matter. But Dave also wrote me letters. He transcribed all this stuff that he was talking to me about, in handwritten scratch in the hotel memo pads, and sent me this stuff from Europe, and then invited my girlfriend and I out to stay with him for a week. And just like Todd Jensen telling you, hey, look me up when you're in Birmingham. Yeah, Dave offered. And so I said, yeah, I'll take you up on a week at we stayed a week. I didn't know that he had necessarily wanted us to stay that long, but my girlfriend and I went out on spring break my last year in college, and I saw this incredible opportunity to be like that. I saw him live in his dream, and we went out and helped him shop for cars. He had this beat up old Datsun pickup, and we went out and shopped for a nice new Infinity. And he lived in a suburb, normal house. He was barbecuing and he was cooking for us and treating us like kings and queens. And I loved how humble he was. I loved seeing that he could, live the life he wanted to live without necessarily, he didn't have to flaunt anything. Then we would go watch him rehearse with the band. And he, again, this is another eye opener. He was treated like shit. His experience with Vedder was horrible. And it was really hard to watch. They didn't like the fact that he was smiling and that he was personable and that he was gregarious and out making friends with, quote unquote fans. So that was a disappointment. But it was also pretty amazing to watch. Your question was about the booking opportunities, watching these bands from the formative days just blow up to be the biggest band in the world in a really short period of time, for mostly the right reasons. They had the musicianship and they had the star power. And we also worked with Alice in Chains at the same kind of point within a couple of months. And they were also just starting to blow up with Dirt. Yeah. And watching Lane Staley, this real creative genius, but also, in the throes of his heroin addiction, it was tough to watch. What it was really good for me was to see, both sides of things, the stardom, but also avoid that kind of substance abuse.
You were in a band in the 90s which had a development deal with RCA. Was that a band which you joined or a band you helped put together?
Yeah, so I moved out from Montana with two of my best friends, Dave Romans, Luke Duran. Luke was the one that booked those shows, but Luke stayed behind in Montana to kind of finish things up. We had a 3-piece band together, and Dave Abruzzese, he'd said, hey, I'll see what I could do to help you guys book some shows. I was excited about that and getting the help, but when we moved out, my friend Dave, as a solo artist, opened up for this band called, they weren't yet called On a Llama. He opened up a show for this trio that had a female lead singer who was also an incredible bass player, badass, funky slap playing. And it was one of those moments, you could see a star on stage, an unrecognized star. I was so floored by the music, not as impressed with the drummer. He was really sloppy and he'd been drinking a lot that night. And they went on to have some of the shows in Seattle. They asked my friend that opened for him, do you know any drummers that might be a good fit for this thing? And he said, yeah, my buddy Kevin that just moved here would be a great sub for this show. They wanted to go do the showcase in Seattle. So they called me. They said, are you up for playing a show with us? And I said, oh my God, yes. I was only in town maybe 2 weeks. And I said, when do we rehearse? And they said, well, the show's tomorrow night. So here's a cassette. Meet us up there at the show. And I show up with my Eric Carr drum set, right? I show up, I drive up and I've got my double bass kit, big, tons of rack toms. And they said, you won't be needing these. And they just set my other bass drum and all the toms aside, stripped me down to a 5-piece kit. And the show was great.
No sound check rehearsal of any kind.
Yeah, it was a throw and go, man. Yeah, because, we played with a whole bunch of metal bands, and this band was not metal at all. It was funky driven. At that point, Lilith era stuff, Sarah McLachlan, Alanis Morissette was kind of blown up. And so musically, it was more funky than that. It wasn't subdued wrist slashing sadness, but I was so smitten with the band and they asked if I wanted to join. I didn't realize they hadn't let their other drummer go at that point. So I was in the band about a year before we were rehearsing for the recording studio for the first record when the drummer showed up and was really pissed that I'm there in his seat. And again, another indicator to me that this is kind of what happens in the music business, and so communication is key. I got so busy with that band On a Llama that I had to let my friend's band go. It was tough because we all moved out together, but our bass player took 6 months to get out, and things were happening for the other band. And so the gentleman who came in to replace me ended up becoming my best friend, and my friends were really mad at me. We've all made up now and it's all good. But that best friend, we've been thick and thin since 94. And it's tragic that the last 4 years he developed ALS and can no longer play drums. And he's a hero of mine. And, moral of that story really, is that you cannot take anything for granted. You have to appreciate every day that you've got. So that was, a precursor to any of the real success that I had. But at the same time, watching these kinds of things unravel, that's real life and it's tough. So that band, On a Llama, over the course of about 4 years, did so many shows up and down the coast in the Northwest, playing Vancouver in Canada and Seattle and Portland and, as far south as Southern Oregon and Idaho. And bands were really starting to be recognized in the Northwest, well, in Portland at that point. And I was the outgoing one in the band that was really I was working in a music store, so I could talk to distributors, and I kept talking to record labels saying, hey, you should be spotting us. And one of the bands that opened for a couple of shows, when we finally saw them, I was so blown away by the vocals and the drums. This is Miles Kennedy with his band Mayfield 4. They've all since become friends of ours and friends of mine. And I didn't even want to go on stage after seeing them. I thought, oh my God, what the hell is this? So we all shared connections with label people. They had Susan Silver, Chris Cornell's wife, at that point representing Miles and his band. And he was looking at us. He brought some people out to take a look at our band. We had guys from Atlantic come out. And one of the labels that we talked to, well, it was Atco, the Atlantic guy, said, hey, we're coming out from New York to see you guys at the show, but we've been told that your manager is just interested in signing your singer and not the band. And I said, we don't have a manager. And found out she did, and she was kind of negotiating a deal for herself. And so again, heads up that, communication's key. I asked her about it. She said, no, that's not true, but it was true. When I found out a little more, I decided it's time to leave the band. They signed the development deal with RCA. Michael Shreve, drummer from Santana and HSAS, back with your Neil Sean connection. He signed the band. Gold Circle Entertainment was the deal. Al Warren, the guitarist, I said, hey, buddy, it looks like, this is not a future for you. But he said, no, that would never happen. And sure enough, they were dumped, and she took the deal, got shelved almost immediately. Unfortunately, it was a real tragic thing for her that it was too much, too fast. She was real self-destructive, and she had a nervous breakdown, and she doesn't perform anymore. And to this day, I feel like she was the most gifted songwriter I ever worked with. Leah Kruger is her name. And, these are not stories that people haven't heard before in every corner of the business. But for me, it was devastating because I was so determined to make that band as big as any band possible. We had all these dreams to start health insurance for musicians that couldn't afford it. We wanted to get that successful that we could start a new fund.
Make a difference in other ways, even outside of music.
Yes, absolutely. There were some altruistic ideas behind everybody's goals. And so when that happened, I had been with my wife at that point. We met when we were 12. We'd been together for so long, and she knew, and she was so supportive of my music desires. She knew that my hope was to be as successful as I could. I told her, let's make a deal. I'm going to work this thing hard until I'm 28. If for some reason music stardom doesn't happen to the level that I needed to be, let's have a family. Let's start that chapter in life. So we did. And from that point forward, all the really good stuff in my life started to happen musically, almost instantaneously after having my first child. Yeah.
At what point did the Jennifer Batten collaboration come in? Is that around a few years later? Or?
Yeah, a few years later. So 98 was when I decided, I'm just going to play for fun and no longer for the pursuit of music stardom. Shortly after that, Bill Wadhams from Animotion called me and said, I don't know if you know our band. They said, oh yeah, of course. I roller skated to your songs when I was a teenager. And he said, we have this one show coming up that we'd like to do as a reunion gig. We have all the members, the original members, except the drummer. We can't track him down. And I was so excited. It was on my birthday, 2002. I was thinking, oh my gosh, yeah, this is the gig of my life. And the guitarist from the band had been with Rod Stewart for a long time at that point. The keyboardist has a long pedigree. He played keyboards on the Michael Jackson Thriller record. That's him on Beat It and Billie Jean. And so there were players in that band. And when we were at soundcheck, the guitarist said, hey, this is the best this band's ever felt. We should continue to do it. So we started playing a lot of shows, played Massey Hall in Toronto. We played hundreds of thousands of people for this big Nike event in LA, so it was an interesting sort of coincidence that all the 80s stuff, 80s pop music was really starting to pick back up again. That cycle of interest came back around. I think all the adults had gotten to the point where they needed to have their unwind time. They had enough financial backing that they could go off and do vacations to see 80s bands. And I played with that band for almost 16 years. So I did that band for 3 years. I was still working a day job for a big tech company. And I get a phone call at my day job saying, hey, this is Jennifer Batten. I'm looking for a drummer. I just moved to the Portland area, and I'm looking for kind of a Bonham guy. I've been told by 2 different people at this club that you're the guy. And I'm like, this isn't Jennifer Batten. There's no way. And she said, well, I can call somebody else if you want. And I said, no. no, I'll do the gig. Sight unseen. I said I would take this gig, not realizing how badass that woman is. She sent me music and I said, send me some stuff, FedEx. You couldn't email those files at this point. So she FedExed a package to me. I was going camping with my family that weekend. So when I got back and I heard these CDs, I pooped. I was thinking, there's no way. Oh my, who the hell is this on drums? First of all, turns out it was Glenn Sobel. Been playing with Alice Cooper for about 10 years now.
Even Glenn Sobel didn't want to do it live.
Yeah, well, but he does. I mean, he was a kid when he did that stuff with her. He was like 20, 21. And at that point, he was taking the best elements of guys like Terry Bozzio and Dennis Chambers and Vinnie Colaiuta, like the biggest, most badass drummers out there. He combined into her stuff. And it didn't even make sense to me. I asked her, okay, who's this dude? And how do I get a hold of him to get some lessons? And our first gig was going to be the World Guitar Congress in Baltimore, Maryland, with Eric Johnson, John Schofield, so Dennis Chambers is there, like all the biggest guys sitting front row watching, arms crossed. And thank God she said, I don't need you to play like Glenn. I want you to play like you. And so we developed such an amazing friendship. I didn't know how many shows we were going to do at that point. We were just going to do this one Baltimore show. And we did a good handful of shows in the Portland area. Unfortunately, the Guitar Hero thing isn't recognized as much, in a commercial sense. And so we'd be playing these venues, pretty large venues, they hold like 1,500 up here, the Crystal Ballroom, and there'd be 300 people there, all musicians, arms crossed, just watching, and studying every note. And it was really hard to see because I wanted for Jennifer to have this massive, fan base. She'll go to Europe and she'll draw huge crowds. She goes to Japan and she's enormous, because of the Michael Jackson connection. Europe, she's really connected mostly, I think, because of the years that she played with Jeff Beck. Back home, it's really tough for her. So she put together a multimedia show. She'd have videos that she created to go along with her music and backing tracks. And she'll just go play solo shows where she doesn't have to worry about paying a band or dealing with all the babysitting that comes with being in a band. And she teaches like guitar symposiums online as well with the biggest names. And so I'm working with her a lot on that, doing web work for her. And yeah, she's amazing. And that was a game changer for me too. When she called, it was not just the musical opportunity, but to develop this incredible friendship that to me, she's like my sister.
And wasn't she one of the inspirations, the people who pushed you to do All Access Live, your podcast? Which
she is the one. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So bringing that around when the pandemic came about, our guitarist, Gord Depp, is a Canadian. He's known for his band, The Spoons in Canada. We're a quite successful band in Canada. And they actually toured with A Flock of Seagulls opening for the Police back in 1981. So fast forward to a few years ago, Gord becomes the guitarist in A Flock of Seagulls. He calls me on Facebook Live and we're having a little chat. And a lot of friends that we've developed over the years touring were chiming in about the conversation we had. And it was sort of like this. It was a voyeuristic conversation where he and I were talking about this crazy pandemic and how this might go on 2 or 3 months. What are we going to do in that time? And Jennifer reached out to me and she said, I watched some of that and I watched the way you disarmed the conversation. You brought it down so that everybody was involved. You'd answer some of the questions that people had. And she said, you should consider doing a podcast. And I said, no, everybody's got a podcast. And what do I have to say? She said, you don't have to say anything, just talk to your friends and have them talk. And it's interesting. And I said, well, if you do one with me, then I'll see about it. And now 199 episodes later, since this point last year, I've done so many. And you've done this for a while, so you understand it's a labor of love. There's a lot of work that goes into it. But to me, it was a savior during the pandemic. I got connected emotionally to so many people. Most of the people that I've talked to have been friends that I've toured with or that I've met throughout the years. But there have been incredible, transformative conversations that I've had with people that have changed my life. Some of those people have mentioned that it's changed theirs too. But selfishly, it's just been phenomenal for me.
I think you said, though, you've took on some negatives from it as well, taking on people's struggles, which they're having, dealing with the situation as well. Are you a person who takes on other people's baggage?
It has been my thing. I mean, when I was a youth counselor, I would bring in all these kids that I would see that had just horrible family situations. Yeah, I would internalize their pain. So there were a good handful of conversations I had where my friends would express their desperation to get out and do what makes them alive by playing music. And when the pandemic shut everything down, fans of music, and I hate to even call people fans, really. I mean, for me, people that we've met, they're friends of music. When they go out to see live music, it's fulfilling to them in one way. Musicians, people that are involved in the industry, that is their identity. So it's the worst identity crisis you could possibly have when everything goes away with no end in sight, right? And so a lot of life becomes futile. And so when I talk to some of these friends of mine and they'd express more than just frustration, it was a real dash to their mental stability. Yeah, I think I took a small percentage of each of their things on over time. And outside of the podcast, it's been a really challenging several years, and I'm grateful to have had the experiences I've had, but I went through a divorce, had a really difficult breakup with a gal afterwards. My kids have, experienced some of the speed bumps in life, and it kicked my ass, emotionally kicked my ass. Over the course of the pandemic, I was turning 50. I had a major surgery, and I think all those things combined to amass that negative sense that I took on from people. And I had a breakdown, and I tried to take my life. And so what it did for me was, thankfully, give me a second chance at looking at the important things in my life, to not take anything for granted. Again, I talk about my friend and his battle with ALS. I felt so selfish in that instance, realizing that this guy has had to battle much more insurmountable things and has remained as positive as you can be. When I talked openly about that on my podcast, about my struggle, I also didn't want to continue to be that way, right? So I got tremendous amount of therapy, started working with a group sort of driven therapy called dialectical behavior therapy, DBT, really focusing on emotion regulation, distress tolerance, developing coping skills, which I did not have. When I started talking about that, other musicians and other friends and clients would come to me and say, I'm so grateful that you're open about this, because it's something that we've held on to and been ashamed to talk about for so long. Now it feels like we can talk openly about it. We can seek help, and we can find an opportunity to grow from this. We can develop those coping mechanisms, because it's okay to admit that we're human, and we let life kick our ass a little bit. So, I'm not, I don't bring it up as a request for sympathy or empathy or anything like that. I'm so grateful to have had the experience so that I can grow from it.
Do you think there's also, I think it's something you mentioned, do you think there's elements of it where people don't realize there's a problem? You just hold it all in. I'm fine. I'm going to be all right. And it just takes something to make people open up at some point.
I think, at this point, when we get this point in our lives, we've all amassed certain things that we've shoved down deep. And in my podcast, I went from just having conversations with musicians, friends of mine, to other friends of mine that are visionaries and authors and athletes. So you think about the life of an athlete. Most athletes only have a small window of time where they can have their identity. So when their identity is compromised, whether it be a parent who, like say a mom whose whole sense of purpose is to be maternal. When your kids get older and they no longer need you, the identity as mom kind of gets thrown by the wayside, and it affects so many people. And I know women it's been devastating to them. So yeah, everybody tends to push some things down unless you're so evolved that you can talk about it. And I think the best parts about the pandemic were me having to slow down. Even though I've taken on a ton of podcasts, I was going, as I mentioned, I was in high school playing until 2:00 and then, just trying to shove a lifetime of living into every moment of life. And I still want to do that, but I want to be able to slowly smell the roses. And I want to recognize that being mindful of where I'm at doesn't take anything for granted, that you can absorb and take in the best parts of life along the way.
I love it, man. I love it. How are things? Well, how have you enjoyed being in Flock of Seagulls since the old Animotion thing? Did you ever perceive yourself going down this 80s route?
No, not at all. No, if you would
It like went from one to the
right.
next.
Yeah. No, if you asked me in 1988, which band you're going to be in, I would have said, yeah, I'm replacing Eric Carr in Kiss, and this is my gig. Right. And my nickname since those days has been Kevy Metal. That's always, I've been the metal guy or the rock guy. When Animotion called, like I said, I was roller skating to their stuff. 15 years later, Bill Bottoms from Animotion had always regarded me as the heavy metal addition to the band. When that band first popped and when Obsession was like their first breakout single, if you listen to that song, there's a ripping metal guitar solo in it. It was so different than anything else that was out there in the 80s pop scene. And so playing in that band, I could hit hard, playing all acoustic drums, and they weren't looking for a drum machine. They wanted somebody that could play like Tommy Lee backing up, Animotion, which was awesome. So in that time, I developed a friendship with the Flock of Seagulls because we were doing all these shows together, and they were buddies of mine. Their drummer was a great friend of mine. And unfortunately, that poor guy, he burned his hands really bad at the end of 2015, and he didn't know if he was going to be able to play again. And they had these shows booked, first a Vegas show and then an 80s cruise going down to the Bahamas, and called me up just before Christmas and said, and mind you, our weather here is very much like yours there in the UK. We get rain, it's gloomy and rainy and cold. And they called me up, about that time and said, hey, you want to go to the Bahamas and go get paid to get on a cruise ship? And I said, are you kidding me? Yeah, of course I would love to do that. I was sad about my buddy knowing that he was going to come back and take the gig back on. Didn't feel at all like I was, a threat to his position or anything like that. But when he came back, he wasn't interested in doing it again. He had left the band a bunch of times and he was ready to be done. And I had no idea that not only was the 80s pop sort of genre getting so big again, I had no idea how many shows a Flock of Seagulls was going to be doing. And it's amazing. I mean, we had like 75 shows canceled last year because of the pandemic.
So does Mike live over here?
Yeah, he's got a home in Liverpool, and then he's got another home in Florida. He'd been in Liverpool the entire time during the pandemic and lockdown, and just escaped, to be over here to do some shows. We did some shows there in the UK. We did a little tour, played the Cavern Club in Liverpool, which was this amazing return back. It was so fun. And really that day, a Flock of Seagulls was honored in the Wall of Fame outside in the bricks, and so of course, not being an original member, I don't take it as an honor to me. I just am so proud of him and the band, and I love the history of that band. It's interesting because you asked, is it so different playing in that band? I love that Mike still wants me to hit hard. He wants me to bash him, and there's a massive fan base of original Flock of Seagulls, especially on Facebook. There are these groups where they'll just dog everybody that's not an original member, and it's really interesting because as a guy who just unfortunately really likes to be liked, it hurt for a while. And then I decided, you know what? I'm going to win them over. And so I would join those groups and I'd watch, and they'd say, oh yeah, well, there's no way we're going to go out and see them at the Cavern Club. Even though we want to go see, those songs, we wouldn't support them if it's not the original members. And then I would say, hey guys, you know what? I'm a huge fan of the original members too. Tell you what, you come out to the Cavern Club and you hang out. And if you don't have a good time, I'll just give you your money back. And then they'll come out and we'll hang out at the shows. And then they'll go back to those Facebook groups and they'll say, man, the drummer's actually kind of a nice guy. And yeah, the rest of the guy. And so I'm slowly working him over one by one to get those people to accept the new iteration. But I love it, man. I mean, the experiences I've gotten to have through that band blow my mind. We've gotten to hit a lot of corners of the world and gotten to meet people that, just are incredible.
Kevin, thank you ever so much, man. I appreciate all the stories and you being so honest and sharing everything with us. It's been great. I've loved it.
Rob, man, I appreciate it too. It's fun to talk to another metalhead.
Thank you so much to Kevin Rankin for really sharing such an amazing journey with me here on the Straight to Video podcast. It's so great to learn about his career and all the people he's been able to connect with over the years. If you want to reach out to Kevin, be sure to check out kevinrankin.com and also make sure to watch some of his great conversations at accesskevin.com. As we head towards 100 episodes of this show, please make sure to catch up on all older episodes at stvpod.com, and you can also check out some straight-to-video music and merch, and as always, shares, likes and reviews are massive and really help grow the show. Hope you had fun listening today, thanks for the great support and can't wait to do it all again soon.